is well. I'm happy to provide a break of some sort from all the Pesach preparations, and hopefully this will be a slight preparation for Pesach as well. But as with everything, these shiurim, the idea of the shiur really entitled "The Messages of the Month," because it's hopefully designed to provide some thoughts and perspectives on the upcoming month as a whole. So today, of course, was Rosh Chodesh Nissan, and what we're really going to try and focus on is the month of Nissan. And what does that mean? How does that fit into the focal point, which of course is Pesach itself? What is the significance of this month? And for that, we're going to hopefully get to a place where we're going to understand a little bit more about the nature of time itself and what that means. There's a lovely little story. Just begin with a little story. There's a story of a clock that was very high up on the tallest building in the shtetl. So everyone would go about their business during the day, and every so often they would glance upwards and they'd check their watches and make sure their watches told the right time, because it was the only big clock in the shtetl. Sometimes, of course, there would be an inconsistency. And what did you do when there's an inconsistency? So you reset your watch, right? You reset your watch to the correct time on the major town clock in the shtetl. But eventually, times change, and there is a murmur of discontent in some of the population. What was their problem? They said the problem is that the clock is so high up. If only the clock was a bit lower, it was at eye level, it'll be much more accessible, much easier. Every time we're not sure, it's a pain in the neck, literally. We have to always crane our necks upwards. If it was just lower down, it would be so much easier. And then someone else said, what if the clock's wrong? If the clock was wrong, it's almost impossible to change it. If the clock was on a lower building, it's so much easier to fix the clock. So everyone is getting very upset. The locals are becoming very vocal, and they call a town meeting and they make a decision. And at this meeting, they decide that they're going to lower the clock. So they put the clock lower down, but then a very funny thing happens in the shtetl, because when they see the difference between the town clock and their watches, so now, instead of adjusting their watches to make sure the watches will fit the town clock, what did they do? The clock was right there. So they adjusted the clock to fit their own watches, because they knew their watch must be right. And they could see it now, and it was accessible. They could just move the hands on the clock a tiny bit, and it would do the same as their watch. And someone else would then go by, and the next person would readjust the clock just a little bit. And of course, within a short period of time, the clock had been fiddled with so often that it was no longer worthwhile, that it broke down. And the consensus then was that actually the clock isn't really relevant anyway. It's not worth fixing anymore. And they decided to do away with the clock altogether. We'll come back to this little story and the owner. Thank you, Joanna. Yes, I'm staying apolitical for the moment. But we'll try and come back to that a bit later on, and why that's significant to what we're going to talk about today. Does anyone? Would you like me to share the screen if I'm sharing some sources? I did, so we did send them around, but let's make it easy for everyone, and try and share the screen here. Just give me 1 second. That should work. Okay, can you see that? Yeah, you can see that. Everyone see that, right? Yeah, you got it. Good, great. Okay, so the Haggadah, we have this unusual paragraph in the Haggadah, which I think every time we arrive at it, we ask ourselves, what is it trying to tell us? Yochel me Rosh Chodesh, you might think you can fulfill the mitzvah from Rosh Chodesh, Talmud Lomar. So the Pasuk says, Bayom Hahu. You have to do it on that day. If it's on that day, Yochel mi ba'od yom, you might think that you can fulfill the mitzvah of telling the story of Yetzias Mitzrayim, of the Exodus, on Erev Pesach. Talmud Lomar, the Pasuk says, Ba'avur zeh. Because of this, or when this, on account of this. What is this? It has to go together with the matzah maror, when the matzah maror are placed in front of you. Now, if you stop and think for a moment, there's something very strange here. Why would you think that you should fulfill the mitzvah of Seder night, right? The mitzvah of telling the story from Rosh Chodesh. What is the significance? Why would you have that? Why would that occur to you to do so? It seems to be, says Ramosha Shapiro, whose ideas we're taking and hopefully developing this evening, is that the entire month per se would have been suitable to talk about the Exodus from Egypt. That a particular day is effectively, is not, wouldn't, you would think at least, would not be the main focus, but we have an entire month of Yetzias Mitzrayim, the month of Nissan. Where do we see this in the Torah? So if you look in the Torah says, at the end of Parashas Bo, it brings the story of the halachas of Kadesh Li Kol Bechor, the sanctification of the firstborn, Petek or Rechem of Bnei Yisrael. This is source 1. Who it carries on, and then Moshe says to the people, remember Zochores Hayom Hazeh, remember this day that you've left from the house of slavery. Hashem is taking you out with a strong arm, and you must not eat chometz. And then you have Hayom Atem Yotzim, the day you are leaving today, B'chodesh Ha'aviv, in the month of spring. The emphasis on the month. What does that mean? What is the significance of the fact that the month has to be mentioned at all? What is the significance, except obviously when it is, but we know that from earlier on in the piece, right? And the fact that it is spring, what is the significance of that? And again, you see again, it carries on. The next pasuk says, etc., 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 that I've sworn to your ancestors, the land flowing of milk and honey, and you shall perform this service again, in this month. So again, this emphasis in the Torah talks about specifically this month. And if you look at the Ramban on that pasuk, the Ramban says, the time Kadesh Li, source 2, the reason for these words Kadesh Li, sanctify for me, that's telling us Shekadesh Somiyad, they had to sanctify the firstborn immediately. The mitzvah applied in the desert. They didn't wait until they entered the land of Israel. The mitzvah applied immediately. The Hosifa Parsha mitzvahs rabbos, and the Parsha added many mitzvahs. Sheyizkru hayom v'hachodesh ha'aviv. That they should mention, they should remember the day and the month that it was the spring. So there is this emphasis here, meaning what are these extra commandments that are added? What are the extra mitzvahs in addition to the sanctification of the firstborn, to the kedusha of the bechor? What is that? The idea is that the day should be remembered and the month that it was spring. That's what the Ramban is saying. You need to remember this day on which you left Egypt and the fact that the month was spring. This is a very important point that the Ramban is saying. The Ramban is saying that there is a part of the remembrance. The remember what happened is not just the day, but it's to the entire month. You need to remember the month and remember the fact that it was spring. It's a part of the commandment, part of the mitzvah of remembering of Yetzias Mitzrayim itself. The strange thing is that we don't really see in the Haggadah that we focus on the fact that it was in springtime. Why is that part and parcel? What's the significance of the fact that the month was spring, that was Chodesh Ha'aviv? So we need to understand really what's going on here. So if we look a bit further, we find that in the Haggadah itself, obviously this is the Parsha of Avodim Hayinu. In the paragraph of Avodim Hayinu, what do we say? We focus on the fact that the mitzvah is, even if we were very wise and very understanding, we know this. We'd have to talk about Yetzias Mitzrayim. If you put it very simply, what is the mitzvah on Seder night? The mitzvah on Seder night is to speak about our departure from Egypt, right? Yetzias Mitzrayim. We talk about the leaving from Egypt. We say the same thing when we talk about the story that went on with the story of Rabbi Lezer. The great Chachomim, same thing. It talks about, they were talking about the Yetzias Mitzrayim, the exodus from Egypt. But the really strange thing is that if you look at the Rambam, in Hilchos Chometz U'Matzah, the Rambam talks about what the mitzvah is. Listen to how the Rambam defines the mitzvah. The Rambam says, mitzvah saseh shel Torah, it's a mitzvah saseh in the Torah, lesaper, to tell, b'nissim v'niflos, the miracles and the wonders, shenasu la'aviseinu b'Mitzrayim, that were performed for our ancestors in Egypt, b'leil chamisha asar b'Nissan, on the night of the 15th of Nissan. Shenemar, as the Apostle says, Zochar es hayom hazeh asher yotzosem b'Mitzrayim. Remember this day that you left Egypt. Kamo shenemar Zochar es yom haShabbos. Just like it says, remember this Shabbos. The idea being that you remember Shabbos on Shabbos, and so too, when the time of year comes around again for Pesach, we remember the wonders that were performed for us. And that's what we remember when we know that those took place on the night of the 15th of Nissan. But the really strange thing, and he carries on, he carries on and says, Minayin Shabbalel Chamish Osot Hajin on the night of the 15th, because it says, only when the matzah and maror are there, okay. And he says, even if the one doesn't have a child, nevertheless, even the great chachomim, they are obligated, as we effectively what we say in the Haggadah, anyone who lengthens and says more is praiseworthy. But the Rambam is doing something which seems very strange. Why doesn't the Rambam mention here anything to do with effectively leaving Egypt? What does he say? He says, the mitzvah is to remember the wonders and the miracles that were performed for our ancestors. Nissan v'niflosh and Asul Avusenu, b'Mitzrayim, on that night of the 15th. Hold on a second. I thought we were talking about leaving. They left the next day. That should be the main focus. Surely it's about the departure from Egypt. The miracles are wonders important. We tell the whole story, of course. But at the end of the day, how can he say that that is the positive mitzvah? The positive mitzvah is the miracles, remembering the miracles themselves. What is the Rambam doing here? And it becomes even more interesting when you look at the next paragraph in the Rambam, because the next paragraph of the Rambam is like this. Mitzvah lo yodi'a labonim, says the Rambam, it is a mitzvah to tell our children, va'afilu lo shalu, even if they don't ask. Even if the children don't ask, you've got to tell the story. Pasuk says, v'gadato levincha, you shall tell your son, you shall tell your child, according to the ability, the intelligence of the child. Ketzad, how is this? Young, or he was very young, or was literally tipish is foolish. He says, my son, we were all servants. Brings it to life like this servant. That's what we were like from Mitzrayim in Egypt. Hashem removed that, redeemed us, and took us out to freedom. And then he says again, but if the child was older, was an adult, or someone who is wise, he then goes into more detail and explains what happened in Egypt, the nissim shenasu lanu, and the miracles that were performed for us al yidei Moshe Rabbeinu, through Moshe Rabbeinu, hakol lefi daitoi shel ben, everything according to the intelligence of the child, according to the intelligence of the child, right? That is what the Rambam says. So the Rambam here does talk about the simple idea of leaving Egypt. But you see what he's doing here is he seems to divide the mitzvah. Yeah, he does it, it repeats in both paragraphs. If the person is unable to understand anything more, then you make it very, very simple. We left Egypt. That's what we did. We left Egypt. We used to be slaves, and now we are no longer slaves. But when someone achieves a slightly higher level of intelligence, then the Rambam effectively says, there's something else entirely that you've got to talk about. You're not just talking about the fact that we left. You've got to talk about the nissim and the niflois, the miracles and the wonders that were performed. The miracles and the wonders that were performed. There is another point here, which is also a little bit strange in the Rambam. You notice that the Rambam throws in here, at the end, the miracles and the wonders that were performed by Moshe Rabbeinu. And everyone knows that in the Haggadah, Moshe Rabbeinu deliberately doesn't appear, right? Except for one, where he's mentioned by this, it's mentioned. He's mentioned as an aside because we have to say the whole pasuk. So, but therefore we mention Moshe Rabbeinu's name. And yet, the Rambam specifically talks about the miracles that were performed by Moshe Rabbeinu, and where exactly do we fulfill that? Where do we exactly fulfill that in the Haggadah? Now, if you look at the original first moment to try and understand all this, what we've done recently basically is we began with this question, just to read where we're up to. We began with the question of Rosh Chodesh. What is it about the month of Nissan, the Chodesh HaOviv? What is that? Why is that emphasized so much? The Ramban seems to say that it is the mitzvah is not just to remember the day, but also to remember the month. That's got part and parcel of the mitzvah. So what is that? And then we've got this unusual Rambam, where the Rambam seems to have two different levels of what we're trying to achieve on Seder night. On one hand, we're trying to achieve the basic level, we left Egypt. On the other hand, there's this idea of talking about the miracles and the wonders. And where does that come from? How does that fit in? What does that mean? If you look at the very first time when Hashem appears to Moshe Rabbeinu at the burning bush at the snare, it says like this, Vayomer, he said, Ki I will be with you, and this is the sign for you, that I've sent. When you take out the people from Egypt, you will serve Hashem on this mountain. Why is it that the Hashem presents the Yitzias Mitzrayim as bound up with the giving of the Torah? It's almost as if to say that the whole exodus from Egypt is like a preface to the idea of Tavdon Esolekim al Harazah. You will serve Hashem on this mountain. That is, everything is building up to that moment. And actually, of course, that is clear, if you like, in the Aseres HaDibros themselves, right? Anochi Hashem Elokecha asher tzitzicha me'eretz Mitzrayim bebeis avodim. Effectively, when we get to the giving of the Torah, we understand that is really the point. That is the point of the Exodus itself, the Yetzias Mitzrayim. Hashem takes us out of Egypt for that purpose, for that reason. The whole idea is the serving Hashem on this mountain. That is the key, and that is the starting point. Now, what is necessary to understand this when we're thinking of what the significance of that is, because obviously we think that it's obvious. The whole point was it was a journey from Mitzrayim to the giving of the Torah. But the idea is deeper than this. The link between leaving Egypt and the giving of the Torah is that there is a fundamental problem with the fact that the Torah is given to people on this world. And that is, the Torah itself is an entirely different reality. It's a spiritual entity. It's something totally removed from this world. And how is it that that can possibly connect with us? How can it take hold, so to speak, in this world, in our world? And the answer is that it is the process of leaving Egypt and everything that was involved in that. It is the leaving of Mitzrayim and the miracles, the wonders, the Nissan, the Nifloos that take place at that moment that remove not just the Jewish people, but the world as a whole from the Mitzrayim state, the Egyptian state. They're able to transcend from that moment through that process, through the process of leaving Egypt, they're able to transcend the boundaries of this world to somehow connect with something entirely spiritual, with the Torah itself. In other words, it changes everything. It changes the process of leaving Egypt, changes everything. It's the thing which enables the Jewish people to receive the Torah, and therefore the Torah itself to come down to this world. How are we to understand this? What does this mean? The word Mitzrayim, says Rav Moshe Shapiro, it means boundaries. It means boundaries, that's what it means. Mitzrayim itself means boundaries. It always refers to something that is limited. That's what it is, it's a limitation. The Zohar also divides the word Mitzrayim into Meitzar Yam, the border of the sea. The sea is always limited in some way. That's how it is. There is something external to it which prevents the sea from going beyond its borders. There is a limitation always to it. By definition, we refer to Hashem as the infinite one, Ein Sof, we say. Hashem has there is no limit. There are no borders. There is nothing. Mitzrayim, by definition, is the entire opposite of that. It's a boundary, Meitzar Yam, it's the boundary of the sea. The concept of Mitzrayim, of Egypt, changes the idea that there can be something infinite. that there can be something infinite, that it can possibly exist, that there can be anything infinite. That's what Mitzrayim challenges. And you see this in the dialogue between Paro and Moshe Rabbeinu. Look at this. Two fascinating psukim. Vayomer Paro, and Paro says, Mi Hashem asher eshma b'koilo. Who is Hashem? He challenges Moshe Rabbeinu. Who is Hashem that I should listen to his voice? L'shalach es Yisrael. Lo yodati es Hashem. I don't know Hashem. The gamas Yisrael l'shalech, and I'm not going to send out Yisrael. Now hold on a second. Go back to the end of Bereshis, Perek Mem Aleph. Vayomer Paro el Yosef. Paro says to Yosef, Acharei hodia Elokim eschas kol zos. After Hashem has told you all of these things, Ein novayin v'chacham kamocha. There is no one as wise and intuitive as you. You must be the one to help me run this country. When Yosef is taken out of slavery, so did you ever ask yourself, are these psukim completely contradict themselves? On the one hand, Moshe Rabbeinu has said, Paro says, Moshe Rabbeinu, I have never ever heard of Hashem. And on the other hand, he says to Yosef, Hashem has told you all these things. You must be so wise. Now, of course, you might say to me, it may have been a different Paro, different generation. Clearly, whether we understand it as a different Paro, we're familiar with the debate as to whether it was the same, different one, it was a new king, old, whatever. It's not the point. The point is clearly they're representing and they are part of the same ideology. How can one Paro say, Hashem has shown this to you, and the other one say, I don't know who Hashem is? The answer is that the key difference is the name of Hashem that's used. When Paro says to Moshe Rabbeinu, Mi Hashem, he's using the name of Yud Kei Vov Kei. That is the essence of Hashem. That is the name of Hashem's very existence. And regarding that name, Paro says, I have no concept of this name. When he speaks to Yosef, what does he say? He says Elokim. The name Elokim, it's itself the way we understand what the name Elokim of Hashem is. When it says in Halacha that when one says the name Hashem, the name Elokim, one should have the intention that he is all powerful. He is takif bal hayecholes or bal hakochos kulam. His power is unlimited, and he is able to. He has power over everything, all different things. The Zohar says that Elokim is really a word which you divide into two. Mi Eile, who are these? That's what it was. The word Elokim, you reverse the letters, you get Mi Eile, who are these? The idea being that Hashem has power over every single individual power. So the difference between the two names of Hashem is that Paro can relate. He can relate and understand the fact that Hashem has particular powers, each power, so to speak, limited. Of course, it's not limited, it's unlimited. But the fact that it's unlimited is what the essence of Hashem reveals. The name Yud Kei Vov Kei reveals Hashem's essence, that Hashem is completely and totally unlimited. The name Elokim, Paro can recognize, because he can recognize anything that has a limitation. That's what Mitzrayim is. Mitzrayim means boundaries and borders. That's why, but he can't recognize the essence, the fact that Hashem himself is completely unlimited and is all powerful in and of itself and can transcend everything and does transcend everything that exists in this world. Here, you see the same idea also in the difference between Mitzrayim and Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel. Famous posuk in Devarim, Ki ha'aretz asher tov ha'shama, the land you're coming to inherit, lo keretz Mitzrayim hi. It's not like the land of Egypt, asher yitzosim esham asher tizra ezarachom v'shkis arachom gigana yorok. You were able to water the land. V'aretz asher atem ovrim shom rishtar, eretz hama v'koistem, etar sham tishtamayim. In the land of Israel, you're going to be reliant on rain. Very different. Rainwater is very different to water that you have to draw from the Nile, and that's how you get the water. What is the real difference, though? What is the meaning? The difference is that for the ancient Egyptians, everything had to be predictable. They were relying on the Nile. They knew everything. They'd worked it out. The rivers here, we're going to bring the water through the channels here. We know what's going where. We've worked it all out. Irrigation systems, incredible. Cultivation. They know how to water the fields. You're watering it with your feet. You are literally carrying it. They worked out the paths, the tracks, the irrigation canals. They never have to lift their eyes upwards once to heaven. They don't worry about the rain. They don't think about the rain. Everything is known. That's what Mitzrayim is. Everything is known, bordered, boundaries. It's what we see, is what there is. There is nothing beyond that. In the land of Israel, says Moshe Rabbeinu, you're going to arrive in a country where limitar shamayim tishtamayim. You're going to have to look heavenward. And every time you're going to look up there, and you're going to think, is it going to rain today? Is it not? Are we going to get enough rain? We're not sure. We don't know. Is this going to be a good season? Is it not? We don't know. It's entirely dependent on Hashem. It is, by definition, it is something where the entire land transcends the boundaries of this world. It's reliant on looking upwards, looking towards heaven, looking towards Shemayim. So what we see now is that the idea of leaving Mitzrayim is so much bigger than just the idea of the Jewish people themselves leaving a place of slavery. No, it's a completely different idea. It is the idea of being able to think beyond the boundaries of this world. That's what Mitzrayim represents. Everything about the ideology. Paro can't recognize Hashem, mi Hashem. Hashem, the name Hashem represents the infinite. He can't recognize anything infinite because everything is bordered, everything is boundaries. That's what Mitzrayim is. He cannot recognize anything beyond that. When the Rambam says, coming back to that Rambam we explained before, where the Rambam basically divides what we're doing on the night of the Seder into two parts. He talks about the simple and those who are only able to understand the basic level. We say we left Egypt, but that's so basic, says the Rambam. Yes, there was a people who left Egypt, but there was something more. What is there? There's the Nissan v'nefloah, says the Rambam, right? The miracles and wonders that were performed. What is that? That is the wonders and the miracles that were performed for us, introduce into this world things that go beyond the limitations of our existence, that are beyond things that we can explain, that we can comprehend, things that are beyond that idea, the ancient Egyptian idea of understanding fully everything that transpires, everything that's the boundary, like they used to carry the water from where they knew it was in the Nile to their fields. All of that we transcend all of that through talking about the miracles and the wonders, right? The Nile is water and it's transformed into blood. That's impossible, and yet it happens. Now you understand now why the Rambam splits it into two. Yeah, you understand, just to go back a little bit, just to remind ourselves what we're saying, right? The mitzvah saseh shel Torah, he says, l'saper b'nisim v'nefloos. Talk about the miracles and the wonders shenasu l'avosenu b'Mitzrayim on that night of the 15th. Yeah, and then he says in the next paragraph, if there's someone very simple, can't understand more, just say we left Egypt. But he again repeats, if someone who's a ben gadol or chacham, no, tell them about the miracles. Tell them about those miracles, because that is the real transformation that the world undergoes. Instead of thinking of ourselves as limited and with borders, we are beyond that. We go far beyond that. Those on a higher level can understand that. This also helps us understand why at that level, we can bring in, as the Rambam does, what Rabbeinu's role was. Because look at the way the Torah, in those incredible, majestic psukim right at the end of the Zos HaBrocha, when it describes the final legacy of Moshe Rabbeinu, V'lo kom novi od b'Yisrael k'Moshe. There was no one else like Moshe. Asher yodoi Hashem ponim el ponim. Hashem knew him face to face. All the wonders and the miracles, the emphasis on those miracles that Hashem sent him to do in the land of Egypt, to Paro and to all his servants, and etc., etc. These final words, Moshe Rabbeinu's essential role was the one to deliver those, effectively to deliver those miracles. The miracles, of course, came directly from Hashem. Moshe Rabbeinu has that role of placing, so to speak, those wonders in front of Hashem. But Moshe Shapiro says you have to understand that the Haggadah Shel Pesach is meant for everyone. Everyone. That's the whole idea. That's the beauty of the Haggadah. It's meant for the wise and the not so wise, right? And therefore, because it's for everyone, It focuses on the departure from Egypt. That's the focus. That's the basic level, which everyone has to get. And that's why the Haggadah doesn't mention Moshe Rabbeinu, because for that point about leaving Egypt, we can't bring Moshe Rabbeinu into the picture at all. It was Hashem himself who took us out of Egypt. The Exodus, we only talk about Hashem. Yetzias Mitzrayim, we only mention Hashem, of course. But when we go to the higher, the deeper level that we're meant to work on, that requires talking about Moshe Rabbeinu, the wonders and the miracles. That's why the Rambam mentions him. Because as we grow and develop, as we get older, as we deepen our understanding of Seder night, of Pesach, we also need to deepen our understanding of what we're trying to achieve on this night. And the Rambam divides it for us into those two categories. We have the basic level where we turn around and we say, we used to be slaves and now we're not. That's hugely important. That's the primary thing. Get that right first, but then go beyond that. Then we go beyond that. And then we say to those who can understand more, let's understand how the world itself is transformed. And with that, we can understand the significance of Chodesh HaOviv, the month of spring, and what is the emphasis on the month, okay? To the basic level, the young child, what is the difference? It makes no difference when we leave Egypt. Hashem decides we need to leave, that's when we leave Egypt. It could be spring, summer, winter, it doesn't make a difference when it is. Why should it interest us? But the fact that we leave in Chodesh HaOviv, in the month of spring, tells us something else again. It tells us and teaches us about that deeper level of what leaving Egypt was all about. The Radak and other Meforshim explain that there is an interchangeability of the letter Samach with the letter Tzadi. So you look at the word Nissan, the name for the month Nissan, and you can interchange the Samach with the Tzadi. What does that mean? Look at the pasuk in Shiur Hashirim, source 9. Hanitzanim niru ba'aretz. The blossoms, the nitzanim, they were appeared in the land. That's the plural of nitzan. And eis hazomer higia, a time of pruning has arrived. B'kol hatornish ma ba'artzenu. The idea, or zom might be really related to the word to sing as well. The sound of the turtle dove is heard in our land. Nitzanim is blossoming, is sprouting forth. That is what is happening. There is something new. There is something new that appears at this time of year. The blossoms come forth. That's Nitzanim. That's what happens. The blossoms come forth in Nissan. That is exactly the same. That is the link with Nissan and the miracles. HaChodesh hazeh lochem Rosh Chodesh, Rishonu lochem l'Chodesh Yashanu. We learned in the second Sefer Torah on Shabbos. The Chodesh this month is Rosh Chodesh. It's not just that it's Rosh Chodesh. It is the entire newness. That's what it is. It is the head of the month, and is the head of the months, and it's the new point. It's the beginning. It's everything about it. Chodesh is related to Chodosh, meaning new. There is something entirely new coming to existence in Nissan. Nissan, the blossoms come forth literally, and we understand that something totally new came into existence. The idea that there is something transcendent, there is a spiritual reality that transcends the physical basic world that we live in. That is why we ascribe the Yetzias Mitzrayim to the month of spring. It is something entirely new. And that is the essence of spring itself. What is the word Aviv? Where does that come from? It says Moshe Shapiro, if you look at the pasuk in Shiur Hashirim says, El Ginas Egoz Yoradati. Parak Vov pasuk Yud Aleph, the beautiful words of Shiur Hashirim, says that I descended to the garden of the nut garden, Liros Ibei Hanachal. Ibei Hanachal means to see the fully blossomed fruits. The Ibei, if you look at the root of that word, Ibei has Av. What is Av? The root that is the effectively what you have in Hebrew is you can have a word. So Av means a father. What is Aviv? Aviv is the miniaturization. You add those two little letters afterwards, and you get something a bit smaller. You get something which is basically the beginning of it. It's the beginning of it. So Aviv is the beginning of Av. Av is when everything is in full blossom, right? Av is the middle of the summer. That's what it is, right? But the Aviv is the beginning of the summer. Where do you see the same idea? Beautiful idea. The word eitz is a tree. The word is a tree. You know, the word for a flower pot is an atzitz. It's very clever. It's like the miniaturization. The flower pot is the miniaturization of the tree. The tree is the eitz, and the atzitz is the flower pot. Here as well, the aviv is the miniaturization, the beginning of the full blossom. That's what aviv is. Av and aviv. Av is in full, and aviv is partial. So here we understand now the significance of the fact that it occurred in the spring to introduce the whole idea that the world itself became new at this time, achieved a totally new level. And with this, we can understand as well what the concept of time, and go back to our little story at the beginning about the clock and the clock that was brought down to a lower level, because we have this very strange issue with the word that we use for time in our davening on Yom Tov, right? And in fact, we always use the word hazmanim, right? Baruch atah Hashem, we say in the brachas of Yom Tov, saying Kiddush, Mekadesh Yisrael v'hazmanim, who sanctifies Yisrael and the times, the zmanim. Okay. Now the thing is that it's a little bit strange. It's a little bit strange because there are and of course in modern Hebrew, zman means time, right? But the word zman used in this context doesn't appear in the Torah for time. Instead, what the Torah uses, it appears in Nach, in Nevi'im and Ksuvim, but it doesn't appear in the Torah itself. Instead, what is the word the Torah uses for time? The word the Torah for time is moed, right? Now, moed we translate as a Yom Tov, a festival, that's what it means. But what it really means, moed is a destination. Yeah, when you fly to Israel, it will be speedily in our days soon. You use the word, right? They say higia leyad, higatem leyad. Yeah, you reach the destination, right? That's what moed is. It's a destination. It's a point in time that you've arrived. There's a pasuk in I think it's in Sefer Shmuel, and it says vayiva boker, it was morning, vayetzi Yehonasan hasodeh. Yehonasan went out to the field. They arranged a meeting, Yehonasan and David, L'moed David, to David's appointed time. That's what it means. That's an appointed time. Okay. So why is it, that we don't use the word for Yomim Tovim that the Torah uses? Why don't we say L'moyadim? Right? We talked about Pasuk in Bereshis, it's talking about the sun, the moon, and the stars. We work out where the seasons are from there, etc. Why don't we say Mekadesh Yisrael v'hamoyadim? Why should we have Hazmanim, the times? And the other question is, of course, in what way do we work out when Rosh Chodesh is, but in what way do we really, Mekadesh Yisrael v'Hazmanim, we understand that we go through the process, Mekadesh Yisrael, Hashem sanctifies the Jewish people, who themselves sanctify the Yomim Tovim. How? Through fixing when Rosh Chodesh is. If we didn't know when Rosh Chodesh was, we wouldn't be able to work out when Yom Tov is. So why is it that we use a different word than the Torah uses? We say the word zmanim, we don't say moed. And why is it that what this idea of us ourselves, Yisrael, sanctifying the moedim, the festivals? Why is that? What does that mean? So he says, so again, Moshe Shapiro says like this. He says that the real meaning of the word zman is not time. The real meaning of the word zman is to prepare. In Ivrit as well, hazmana, is to prepare. That's what it is. When we say zimun, what do we mean? We invite to bench. That's what zimun is. So it's the same thing. The word zman really means to invite. And the point is that generally we think about time as like a continuum of the past. It's something continuous. The flow of time just surges forward. That's what it is. What we learn at the time of Yetzias Mitzrayim, when we leave Egypt, is that entire perception of time is wrong. That's not how we're supposed to view time. We're supposed to view time as a hazmanah, as a preparation, a direction for the future, not just something that is flowing continuously from the past. No, that's not what time is. Time is readying us and preparing us for the future. It even summons us for the future, like zimun. It summons, let us bench. It's a summons. When Hashem says, "HaChodesh hazeh lochem Rosh Chodesh," this month shall be for you, Rosh. The idea Hashem is saying to us, make this month your own. Ready yourselves to go on this journey. It has echoes of that word Lech Lecha to Avram. Just like Avram is told, go for yourself on a journey, lech lecha. The Jewish people are told in Mitzrayim, "Achodesh hazeh lochem." This is yours. You're going to have to do this. So it's true. The moyadim, the yomim tovim, right? That word moyed, they exist whether we want them to exist or not. They're fixed. They're there. Yes, it's true. We need to work out exactly the date based on working out when Rosh Chodesh is. Of course, in the time of the Beis Hamikdash, when they would work out Rosh Chodesh based on the visual sighting of the moon. But at the end of the day, they are there. They are the destination. The moed is there. What we do is we consecrate the time travel towards that destination, the zman. That's what we do. That's why we say Mekadesh Yisrael v'hazman, because we're on a journey. We're on a journey to get to that Yom Tov. The Yom Tov is going to happen. But what we do, the question is what we can put into that journey to get to that moed. That's why we say Mekadesh Yisrael v'hazmanim. So the lesson of the idea itself of the month and sanctifying the month, the idea of a Chodesh Hazeh Lochem Rosh Chodoshim, is to tell us that we don't have a control of the Yom Tov itself. Hashem sanctifies the festival, the Yom Tov. That Hashem, the Kedusha Hashem gives. What we do is we determine our level of preparation, the hazmanah, the zman that we have. That's what we do. The way we devote our minutes, our hours, our weeks in preparation. And then the question is, are we going to be like the people of the town who look up at the town clock, the central guide? Remember that little story? And they see the moed, the point in their destination, the place they should always be setting their watches to? Are we going to be like the people in the town who always strain their necks to look up? And they think maybe the clock's wrong. Maybe the clock's wrong. Maybe it's not us that are wrong. Maybe the clock is wrong. Let's take the clock down to our level. Let's fix the clock to match our watches, to match our own ideas of what we think our destination should be on our level down here. If we're going to try and change the clock, if we try and change the moed, we try and change our values, our Masorah, that's when, God forbid, we risk breaking the clock. We risk breaking the values. That's what happens. Once you bring the clock down to your level, someone is going to fiddle with those hands. Someone is going to say, you know what, we'll just change it a little bit. We'll tinker with it just a little bit. Just to make fit with our watches, just that little bit. And then what happens is you risk breaking the clock entirely. Alternatively, and the right way to look at it, is Mekadesh Yisrael v'hazmanim. We sanctify the time, the journey towards that destination. The destination is defined by Hashem. It's not defined by us. The town clock, we may not always understand exactly how it works. Sometimes we think that our own watches are a little bit out of sync with it. But what it does is the clock allows us to view our own time, not just as a continuum from the past, but as a hazmanah, a direct preparation for the future, a zman, when we sanctify the time of the month of Rosh Chodesh, the month of Chodesh Nissan itself. What we're doing is we're elevating everything we do, our time and our preparation to arrive at that destination, to that moed. So let's just briefly recap what we've said this evening. We began with the idea, why is Rosh Chodesh, why is the Chodesh, the month of the Aviv, why is that so central? What is that? What is it about the month that becomes so central to Pesach itself? We brought several different sukkim. We see the Ramban said the same thing, the idea that it's the Chodesh HaAviv. Then we brought the Rambam. The Rambam makes this distinction between two different levels in how we perform the mitzvah on Seder. You have the basic level, we left Egypt, but then you have the deeper level about the Nissan v'Niflas, the fact that the world itself, not just the Jewish people left Egypt, the world itself transcended what Egypt represented. Egypt represents boundaries, it represents limitations, it's Meitzarim, the boundaries of the sea. Paro cannot see. Paro cannot see Hashem. Hashem, he doesn't understand the concept of the infinite with a capital I. It's not something he can comprehend at all. But ultimately, the purpose, the journey of the Exodus of leaving Mitzrayim is to get to Har Sinai. On Har Sinai, Hashem says, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, I am Hashem your God. It is that moment that there is this transcendent understanding of transcendence itself, that we're not limited in this world, that we can achieve a ruchni spiritual connection in that sense. That, we said, is the difference between Mitzrayim and Eretz Yisrael. So you have Mitzrayim as limited by definition, whereas Eretz Yisrael, you're looking up at the sky the whole time, you're seeing the rainfall the whole time. That's the role of Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu is connected specifically to those wonders and miracles. When you reach that deeper level of understanding, you can understand, and you can understand Moshe Rabbeinu's role and how central it was. And then we said that Nissan is the month of miracles. It is also the month of new growth. The Nes is the miracle, and Nates is a new growth. The Tzadi, Nitzanim Niruba Oretz. That is what the month of Nissan represents, because it's something entirely new. The world itself achieves a totally new level. It is the newness. HaChodesh, we said HaChodesh Hazeh Lochem, and the word Aviv, spring, is the miniaturization of the full growth. That's what Aviv is. It's the beginning. It's the coming forth. It's the original blossoms. And when we understand that, we can then understand why it is that we say in our davening, Mekadesh Yisrael v'hazmanim. Hashem sanctifies the Jewish people. What do the Jewish people do? The zmanim, the zman. That's what we do. Our role, what we can do, is work towards a destination, a zman, like hazmanah, preparing ourselves for something. What are we preparing ourselves for? For that moyed, that destination in time. It is a belief that we can reach a transcendent level. We can break beyond those boundaries that we feel we are in our Mitzrayim lives, in our limited, restricted lives. When we see the clock and we keep the clock, the town clock, up there on the tower, we don't bring that clock down to our level. We say, no, I'm going to change my watch to fit that town clock. That is the work of the month of Nissan. And that is a work which goes not just about Pesach itself, but it's the entire way through the month and beyond. And hopefully that's a little bit of insight into Nissan, the month of miracles. I'm happy to take any questions if anyone has, and it's something or we can, anyone, is that anyone clear? Anyone?
1 second.
I've got a question.
What is it, Danny?
So just the fact that it's Aviv, so it means Pesach has to happen in the springtime. And does it not mean that with the solar and lunar calendars, because the lunar calendar goes back by 10 days, doesn't it introduce the whole concept of leap years?
Indeed, we have the leap year concept because Pesach has to be in spring, which reinforces it. What is this fixation? Who cares? Why does it have to be in spring? So it took place in spring, okay. But no, because it's essential to the entire idea of what Yetzias Mitzrayim really is. It's not just us leaving Egypt. It's the world leaving. It is the spring, the idea of something new and different and growing something totally different to what you can see. The whole concept of spring is a miracle. There's the bracha we say from in Chodesh Nissan, we see the blossoms, right? It's a miracle. The world's been dead and suddenly it comes back to life. It comes back to life, yeah. And I'm very grateful also.
It's like the Jewish spring instead of the Arab spring.
Indeed. I'm very grateful also to Mrs. Kelly's comment here on the chat. I think it's absolutely true. I didn't think of that, but the idea of the clock changing is particularly significant. It's a nice story. You're right. The little story of the clock is a good story to share on Seder night when everyone's wondering what time Chatzos is. Depends whether GMT or BST. Don't forget, right? So GMT is going to be an hour earlier, if you're right. It's going to, So therefore, you can share the story of the clock. But thank you all. Thank you all for listening.
Can I ask you, who is it that says the idea that a samach can be swapped with a tzadi?
So I saw Rav Moshe Shapiro. He quotes the Radak. I'm not exactly sure where the Radak is, because he doesn't give the reference. It could be that it's worth looking at that pasuk in Shir HaShirim, where it talks about Nitzanim, right? So the idea of Nitzanim, right? But that depth, and it's incredible, the depth of the the Hebrew language, and you see how that it's very beautiful how you see those words can connect in that way.
Lovely.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay. Have a
Thank
good
Chodesh
day.
Wait 1 second. How do I come on?
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Great pleasure. Thank you. Have a good evening.
Rabbi Birnbaum, when it goes up, then pass it on. Then when it's been put up on for YouTube or something, then people would want to watch it because they can't all do it always at the same time.
Watch what the
To watch this if they can't watch it tonight, like
oh, for sure. No, it will go up on YouTube. Aaron always does that. Once it's up, we'll send you the link and we'll send it out and people can.
Thank you very, very much.
Okay.
I loved your idea.
Okay, great pleasure. Feel free to use it wherever you think.
I've got a friend and her daughter's called Nissan, so she's going to love it.
Who's called Nissan?
My friend's got a daughter.
Oh, okay, beautiful. Okay, very lovely. Yeah, share with
It's
her.
more in the summer, which is interesting, but
Okay.
I was thinking about Av. You said like Aviv. It's like
yes.
a father. It's also like a mini father. It's all like you can have children. I don't know, just like
That's right. That's right. It is that's right. I think he says that. I think as well. Yeah, the word Av it's the same thing as the father. I think that's like it's almost like the child of the father. Or the father's the fully grown, end of it, if you like. That's what seems to be the idea. But it's
thinking about principles, like in terms of like Pirkei Avos, like ideas, or so Aviv is like you take something and you run with it.
Yes. It's the beginning. The idea that's a very. I wonder there must be other examples of that. How with the extra two letters, like he says, Aviv is a miniaturization. It's the beginning.
Love. It's not exactly the same. Like a little puppy.
Love, yes. Which is like what is that?
Puppy. A little kelev. It's like a.
Okay, is that what it's called? What is it called?
I think it's Klav Love.
Oh, really? Okay.
But you're saying it, there's lots of like, probably like the cake is like ugan. I'm sure there's lots of words.
I'm sure, absolutely.
Absolutely. I love the language things. Love it. Thank you so much, Rabbi Birnbaum. Thank you.
Okay, fine. Take care. Have a good evening. Bye.